Howdy, friends. Your friendly neighborhood Monomos was here speaking to you on a lovely November fall day. The trees are turning; they're just quite lovely. Anyway, it's been a while since I've had a chance to talk. I've been severely under the weather. I'm getting better, but as you can tell, I still have something in my throat. My voice may sound a little different. I'm uh, obviously tearing up on my left eye. But I am much better. Okay, so today we're going to speak about Zionism. And first off, caveat aside, caveat included, excuse me, this is going to be an overview. It's not going to be a extensive burrow into the details uh, excursus on what Zionism is. But I am going to hit the high points. And then I'm going to get into a solution as far as America is concerned. But I'm also going to examine why we Americans, especially Protestant Christians, evangelicals especially, have fallen for it. I think there's a cultural reason. Okay, first of all, Zionism was not a Jewish ideology. As I said at first, it was first a Protestant Christian heresy cooked up in the early 19th century by a minor sect called the Plymouth Brethren in England. John Darby, cleric in the Church of Ireland, not the Church of England, but the Church of England branch that is in Ireland, and not the Catholic Church, um, popularized it. I won't say get too much into the details, but Darby and his brethren believed in a concept called dispensationalism, a belief that history was divided into different dispensations um, of salvation history. Eventually, this was formalized into the heretical belief that there were two covenants, one for the Jews, an earthly one, and one for the Christians, a spiritual one. And it was the duty of the Christians to guide the Jews into returning to Palestine and setting up an earthly state. Believe it or not, this was contested by the Jews, who at that time were still overwhelmingly observant. According to their theology, only the Messiah could found or reestablish, so to speak, the earthly kingdom of Israel, not any man or political program. In any event, the belief remained mostly confined to a few Protestant sectarians. However, it gained ground in the late 19th century when Cyrus Scofield, an American lawyer with a checkered past, published his Scofield Reference Bible. With this Bible, with its multitudinous notes and cross-references, it made the study of Scripture quite easy. Its main thesis was that Darby's dispensationalism was the key to understanding salvation history. However, around the time of Scofield, a few assimilated Jews argued that perhaps Zionism was ideal for the creation of a Jewish state. Again, this was contested by the rabbis, the overwhelming percentage of them. Okay, Theodor Herzl, the first president of the Zionist Congress, and I've heard an atheist, enunciated this thesis in his book Der Judenstaat, which means the Jewish state. Herzl, an assimilated Jew himself, came to an understanding that Jews could never be accepted as Germans, French, British, or whatever nationality in whatever nation they happened to reside. For him, the breaking point was the Dreyfus affair, in which Alfred Dreyfus, the only Jewish officer in the French army, was convicted of being a spy for the Germans. The charges were likely spurious, but the resulting scandal ripped apart French society. It was like the Clarence Thomas hearings here in America, or the Kavanaugh hearings. So it just was a it resulted in tumultuous divisions within French society. Well, for the record, Dreyfus was convicted and sent to serve a life sentence on Devil's Island. So if you ever saw the movie Papillon, you know what I'm talking about. That said, there was no consensus among world Jewry still. As stated, those who were observant were committed to the Messianic program. As for those who were secular, political Zionism started to become more preponderant. It became more attractive. Curiously, an internationalist faction was growing in popularity as well, which I will call Trotskyism for want of a better word. In other words, international communism. And the idea of Trotsky and the international communists, the Bolsheviks, was that Jews would serve as the vanguard for an international program of of this new messianic utopian state, obviously atheistic. Okay, this is an oversimplification, but be that as it may, Herzl's program began to gain traction, especially among growing segments of non-observant Jews. In any event, upon the end of World War II, the Zionist faction carried the day. The only question at that point was where Herzl's Judenstaat would be placed. Palestine, Argentina, Kenya, even Texas were uh, talked about as um, ideas. Palestine won out. The reason was because of Lord Alfred Balfour, I believe the Secretary of State or Foreign Minister for the United Kingdom, wrote a memorandum to Lord Baron Walter Rothschild, the second Baron of Rothschild, I believe, letting him know that if Britain won the war and they were able to carve up Palestine, they would promise a national home for the Jews in Palestine. Not a state necessarily, but a national home. That became known as the Balfour Declaration. As for Palestine itself, it had long had a significant Jewish presence. It should be noted that even with the First and Second Jewish War, in other words, AD 70 and AD 135, the second being the Bar Kokhba revolt, Jews were never completely eradicated from Syria Palestina, which is what the Romans called Palestine, the Middle East. When the Muslims conquered the area from the Byzantines about 700 AD, they allowed Jewish and Christians communities to flourish there since they were peoples of the book. In addition to certain legal disabilities they had to undergo, they had to pay a jizya tax or a head tax, for instance, which resulted in a state of dimitude. Still, they were allowed that they were tolerated, and in fact, they flourished in what is now Palestine. Palestine, then when the Turks took over, it was not a polity, but it was a region, an area in which Jews, along with Greeks, Armenians, Druze, and Arabs lived mostly segregated from each other, but otherwise unmolested. This remained more or less the state of affairs after World War I, when the Middle East was divided between the French and the British, in other words, the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The French got Syria and Lebanon, while the British got Palestine, which they renamed the British Mandate, or Mandatory Palestine. A word must be said here about the Rothschild banking dynasty. I mentioned them earlier, when oil was discovered at the Baku oil fields of Georgia, again then part of the Ottoman Empire, it was decided that national states had to be created in order for Western oil companies to negotiate with these states or with the natives. Couldn't negotiate with the Turks because they lost that area. In short order, Iraq, Syria, and Transjordan were created as nation states. Lebanon was cleaved off from Syria so that a mostly Christian Arab state could be allowed to flourish. During the interwar years, Jews from the West started migrating to Palestine, but the numbers were minuscule at first. With the institution of the Third Reich in 1933, significant numbers of German Jews began to move there. In short order, a provisional Zionist government was created. Believe it or not, the provisional government worked in tandem with the Third Reich to encourage the additional immigration of German Jews from Germany to Palestine. They even struck a medal in honor of this agreement, which was called the Havara, or the Transfer Agreement. In the aftermath of World War II, agitation for a Jewish state became increasingly louder, and so in May of 1948, the Zionist provisional state was officially recognized as Israel by the United Nations. This, of course, was met with hostility by the surrounding Arab states. We immediately launched a war against Israel. It was during this time that close to 1 million Palestinian Arabs were uprooted from their homes and farms and became refugees in Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. This was known as the Nakba, or the catastrophe. To be sure, the Jewish armies and militias committed atrocities in order to expedite the process. On the other hand, Jewish refugees from Egypt and Iraq were also Morocco and Tunisia, were also forced to leave their ancestral lands. Like all exchanges of populations, things were disastrous. The difference, however, was that the Jewish refugees were welcomed into Israel and encouraged to assimilate, while the Palestinians were not encouraged to do the same in the adjoining Arab states for a variety of reasons. More can be said. That, in a nutshell, is the theory of Zionism, or the history of Zionism, the Nakba and the creation of the Jewish state. Now, however, I would like to address the present situation, not necessarily the events of October 7th and the merciless bombing of the Gaza Strip, but the imputation of anti-Semitism to those who are critical of these atrocities, let's be honest. In my opinion, the idea that all of the critics of Israel are anti-Semites is unwarranted. While it is true that the world is full of Jew haters, and that is what is really meant by anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism, strictly speaking, is a visceral antipathy toward those who speak Semitic languages, in other words, Hebrew, Arabic, Amharic, Assyrian, and so on. Those are all Semites, by the way. Anyway, there are many people who have antipathy toward the Jews, as I said, as Jews, yet these people, but there are many people who have no antipathy to Jews, but they are still horrified by the collective punishment that is being meted out to the people of Gaza. Many critics of Israel are, to be sure, anti-Semites, as mentioned. This is to be expected. Unfortunately, many are not. As I have noted on more than one occasion, I most certainly am not. Okay. So, it is within this light that I'm going to explain my opposition to the actions of Israel and what can be done. First of all, not really much anything can be done. This is an intractable conflict. It's going to have to play itself out one way or the other, probably with a genocide on one side or the other, or a complete ethnic cleansing on one side or the other. That's the only way I see this happening. And the two-state solution is, I give it a 2% possibility. There's no way that the about 500,000 Jews, Israeli Jews, are going to be uprooted from the West Bank anymore. They'll fight to the last. Still, anything's possible. So, with that in mind, here are my 5 proposals for what we can do to extricate ourselves from this and future conflicts. First of all, as an America Firster, I believe that we have no business spending our blood and treasure on overseas adventures. This means that not only do I think we should remove all boots on the ground from all foreign military bases, but we should stop sending all foreign aid to all countries. Not just Israel, but Egypt and the Palestinian Authority. I include in this all NATO countries, Greece and Turkey included. I'm Greek. I'm of Greek descent. There, I said it. Second, all immigrants to America must forswear all previous national allegiances, and I mean that. I really mean that. This would include the practice of dual citizenship. At the very least, anybody who will not give up dual citizenship should be forbidden from serving in the armed forces of the United States and and holding any political office. Third, all foreign lobbies should be banned immediately. Foreign governments who wish to lobby the Congress should do so through their respective embassies. That's what an embassy is for. Okay. Fourth, all NGOs should be disbanded immediately and their resources confiscated. We have no right to interfere in the activities of foreign governments. It is sad to say, but all we have done is destabilize other countries. This is not only unfair to them, but invites blowback to our shores. We will suffer because of what is happening right now in Gaza. Finally, our borders must remain secure. The wall must be built. All illegal aliens who have infiltrated into our country must be shipped back. End of story. In part 2, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I believe that the American populace, especially the heritage American populace, this includes evangelicals, have fallen for a Zionist Christianism or Christian Zionism. But that'll come later. Thank you. Bye-bye.